What's love got to do with it? What's love but a secondhand emotion? I need to look at the rest of the lyrics of this song to know what it refers to. Got to do with it. What are we asking if it's relevant to? I don't know. What's love but a secondhand emotion? Secondhand, so like a hand-me-down? I don't know. These are the real questions that keep us up at night. Do you think 1v1s should get divs for comp? I don't know what that means. So when we talk about a division, we're talking about where your team ranks in Ludi, in Leagues Under the Ink. That is a team competition. So it is not their business nor anything they care about to rank 1v1s. 1v1s are also just not that applicable to winning a 4v4 game mode. Obviously, like, being able to win them helps, but there's always a better 1v1er. But even a better 1v1er can lose to good 2v1ers. So go for the 2v1s when you can. You know, you're not really trying to play this game just to out 1v1 someone. 1v1s are good for practice, for like learning the mechanics of how a fight plays out and being able to effectively execute on them, but it's also not something you should be aiming for, and it's not something that's a top player is really going to pride themselves on that much. If they're really, they'll pride themselves on it, but like more in a lighthearted sort of way. What they really care about is winning the game, and winning the game means that you're playing as a team. How do you feel about the new ranking system compared to Splatoon 2 with negatives and elo hell and all? Worse. I really don't like the term elo hell because there is always a better that you can be that will get you out of whatever rank you're in. Usually when people start despairing and giving up because they're losing and they don't know what to do, that is when they're at the rank that they should really be at. So Splatoon 2 is based on Glicko, and that was it. And that was very fair, and it was brutal, and a lot of times people don't like the brutal honesty of, I am not good enough to reach the next rank yet. But I think that's very valid feedback, very valuable feedback. And this game does not give you that as much. This game rewards you just for playing the game. And I don't think that's good for a ranking system. I don't think it's as... it doesn't tell you as much. It's not as much that you can like set goals towards it, because all that means is just play the game more. So, are there any map mode combinations that you would recommend avoiding playing? I mean, I'm willing to play everything. That doesn't mean that I think everything is good for competitive play. Like, if you're a tournament organizer and you're asking me which maps should I remove from the tournaments, I'm giving you a list of like 4 maps that you should play, right? Or 4 or 5. I get Flounder Heights. I'll include there for now. But like most of them are not ideal. Like, would probably have been banned in Splatoon 2. But if you're just playing solo queue, just play the game. You're not under the same rigorous competitive circumstances. Like, you're not on a coordinated team. Like, it's good practice. So just if you want to get better at the game, play it. How do you make the most out of the Zipcaster? When I try to use it, I always get splattered before I can accomplish anything. It turns me off from using weapons I'd otherwise love, mainly the Octobrush. It's already been linked, but I highly recommend watching Fusion's video on it. I also highly recommend watching players like Prochara and Fusion who are pushing the Zipcaster, because they are the ones who are finding things out about it better than I ever will. It's a very difficult special to get value out of right now. It is a bit undertuned, I think. I think it's underprotected, and the value that you get out of it offensively is not as high as something like, say, an Inkjet's is. So you really need to be super careful and protect your life while you're using it, and finding ways to do that is difficult. I think that like the problem that you're running into is a very common one that arises out of the weapon being on the weaker side rather than you doing something drastically terribly wrong. But I definitely recommend checking out those tips as well, because there's almost certainly also something you can be doing better. Pros and cons of stealth jump and drop roller relative to each other. Drop roller is better if the player is going to see that you're there anyway. But if the player is going to see that you're there anyway, there's a high likelihood they just put a lethal bomb on your jump and you get splatted at a high level. You stealth jump protects you from things like that, from guaranteed splats like bombs or being rolled or something, because the player never sees you in the first place. And that's typically what gets favored in competitive play. You're almost never going to see drop roller in competitive play. You're almost always going to see stealth jump with the vast majority of weapons. There were some niche use cases for drop roller for like the T-Tech or the L3 that had inkjet, because they were just going to be inkjetting constantly in competitive play in Splatoon 2. They're not so much in the meta anymore, so it's not as much of a debate right now, but the vast majority of players run stealth jump if they're going to be jumping in at all. Very few will run anything else. When I first read through this, I missed the bonus question. The bonus question reads, would you consider cereal with milk in a bowl to be a soup? No, I do not. When determining that a weapon is not viable at top levels of play, what is the line for top level? Is that DivX? DivX or anyone who aspires to be DivX. So anybody who's putting in the time and effort that it would take to become DivX. So Div 1 and Div 2, I think, absolutely apply because they're trying to play at that top level. And the reason they're not at top level is that there are deviations from their game planning that is preventing them from getting to that level. When you drop too much lower below, like once you hit like low Div 4 or so, we're at a point where the amount of time and effort that's being put in, the amount of dedication to it might not be there. Or just that the team needs more time to get their mechanics under control. Like they're very definite things that they can do as individuals to get much, much closer to the goal of becoming the best in the world of the game. Whereas once you get to higher levels, you're starting to look at like, no, this player is really doing about the most that they can right now. And they are accelerating themselves about as much as they can. And so at that level, if you're trying to win the game, if that's your main goal, there are certain weapons that you should probably just avoid because they're giving you disadvantages that are not offset enough by advantages. How do you train yourself to take in so much information at once? Sometimes there's like an overload of things happening. It can be hard to parse through what I should be doing when stuff like that happens. You get very chaotic very fast in this game. I have always said you learn to see this game before you learn how to play this game. You learn how to spot little things visually, like splashes in the ink, like shots out of the corner of your screen, like bombs that are near you. You learn to spot those first, and then you learn what to do about them. So the advice that I would give you is when you start to feel overwhelmed, keep trying to process it. Keep trying to like overclock your brain and be like, no, I'm going to notice all of these things. I'm going to keep trying, because you will eventually get there. It will eventually become something that you have down habitually enough that it will work. The way that this mechanically happens is you learn how to be aware of something, you see it, and it becomes a habit what you do about it. And the fact that it's a habit, that it's something you don't have to think about anymore, frees you up to think about something new that you're seeing. And over time, as you develop all these habits, as you condition yourself psychologically to respond to them appropriately, you don't even like have to really think that much to survive in a very high level chaotic salmon run lobby, you know, where there's bosses everywhere and you're just like, nope, paint feet, swim, jump, paint feet, swim. And all of that is in your muscle memory, and all of that is something where you're just visually tracking, nope, I need to go here, and then I need to go here, and then I need to go here, and then I need to go here. And you're just totally fine swimming around in a sea of enemy ink all at home, because you know what the behaviors of those bosses are, you know where the threat's coming from, you know what zone is going to be safe for you, you know what you have to do to clear them, you know. So as you develop habits, you'll free your brain up to process more and more information, and it will feel less chaotic, even though it will look even more chaotic because the game will only speed up. What's the best time to super jump out of a situation? I notice enemies jumping out of a corner. I just push them in. Just put them in. When do I fight versus run? The question is, do you have enough of an advantage to win this fight? So if you're running away, usually the answer is you don't want that fight. But if the weapon outdamages you, if the weapon outranges you, if there are more players that are fighting you than you have fighting them, if they have a special that's out that you can't really get away from, if you don't have an escape route that enables you to back up without completely disengaging from the fight, if you're a weapon that's not really designed for close quarters engagements and you get pushed by one, and there's like no help available, you can't keep that fight alive long enough that somebody's going to be there to support you in that. That's a pretty good kind of list, good checklist to be thinking about. What's a good mentality to have with X-Rank grinding? It feels very disheartening to play since losses feel more punishing than wins are rewarding. Play to learn. Don't play for the number, play to learn. The number will show you the result of how much you have learned. And if that number is not changing as much as you want it to, then that means that there is learning that needs to be done that has not been happening. So look for, what can I learn? What can I learn? What can I learn? Don't worry about the points. When you see plus 30, when you see minus 40, don't let it bother you. Just look at what is happening in the game. Don't think about the results. Think about the process. Don't think about, I'm winning or losing. Think about, okay, so when we tried to push the tower there, I didn't get up in front of the tower very fast, and they just got pushed immediately. So in the next tower control matches, when the tower is being ridden by somebody else, I need to get up in front of it and form that barrier around it so that the other enemy team can't get close to it. The more of those more granular, smaller details you think about, the nerdier you get about the game, the more plans you have, the better you execute on those plans, the better you get technically at the game. The wins will come with time. You don't get better at the game by trying to get better at the game. You get better at the game by trying to get better at one tiny little aspect of the game at a time, and eventually those all add up. Most analysis assumes folks are on teams, and so a lot of it feels situational at best to those in solo queue. Any advice or strategies that are specific to success in solo queue besides prayers to RNGesus for a decent team are already being good enough to carry? It's actually harder to, you have to be more of an analyst to be successful in solo queue. Because in solo queue, you're not going to know what comps you're given. You're not going to know what your game plan is until you hit the screen where you're seeing everyone's comps and you're loading into the map. So in that moment, you need to look at your weapons and be like, here's what our team is going to do. Here's what their team is going to do. What do I do to support my team's strengths and offset their weaknesses? And what do I do to offset the other team's strengths and punish their weaknesses? In some comps, you're going to have to play different roles because you have to compensate for different things that are missing from your team. So the analysis that you're doing is exactly the same as it is in a coordinated setting. It's just you're going to have to adapt more on the fly. You're not going to be able to control as many variables. So you're going to have to say, okay, I thought that what the way this comp works is that this flings a roller is just going to be farming missiles and that I go in whenever they fire the missiles. But it looks like they're just charging into the front of the enemy team right now. I don't agree with that plan, but that's what's happening, and I can't stop it from happening. So how do I play with that style of roller better than the supportive style of roller that I was expecting was going to happen here? And so then you look at it, okay, this Flingza is going to act like a carbon would normally act. Now I'm going to play around them like they're a carbon, and we're going to paint for them, and we're going to try and set up fights for them and like let them shark, and hopefully they get a bunch of picks that way. So all of the analysis still applies. You can't talk as much about callouts and team coordination, but the decision-making and the mechanics are still absolutely there, and the game will still absolutely function the same way. The win conditions are the same. The things that are strong will still be strong, because it's still the same game. It's just you can't talk to each other. What is Gemothy cooking? Nothing currently. Usually pasta. Is the X-Rank matching bugged or something? Teams are incredibly unfair, for me at least. One match I had was triple backline and Octobrush versus quad mid short range shooters on TC. Currently on 16 wins, 32 losses. Maybe I'm just bad, lol, but something seems off. This this to me is you're not analyzing the details closely or carefully or level-headedly enough. You're looking at the number of losses. That's not what's causing you to lose, is the number of losses, right? The weapon comp you've named, yeah, that's not great. Sometimes you're just going to end up in comps that aren't great. But you have to figure out what to do as best you can with all of them. And if you try your hardest on every single one of those comps, instead of giving up on some of the comps and only really trying when you get the good ones, that's going to be to your detriment. Do your best every match and try to learn as much as you possibly can and think more granularly about the game. If you start to feel emotional, like I can't do anything, like my teammates are so bad, just stop playing. Get out of that mindset. That's not true. That's not helpful to think. Think about the game, and that will help you a lot. Is Glooga a viable main? At top level, I would say no. At most other levels, I would say yes. I've seen Gloogas get up to like 2,700 or so X power in Splatoon 2. I never saw them get any higher than that, if I recall. So that's telling me that like there is a certain extent to which this weapon is holding those players back, but it's not a very big extent. You know, most players will never see 2,700 X power. So if, you know, you have the aspirations to be the best player in the entire world, I wouldn't go for it. But if you really like the weapon and want to play it, always just play the weapon, you know, push it as much as you possibly can. And the skills you learn on that will probably apply to other weapons too. And if you end up in a comp environment where you're like, I really need a weapon that's going to win, then you can pick something else. Do you have any tips for becoming a better Rainmaker player? I mean, hero shot and really suffer in Rainmaker. So I don't know what it is you're doing wrong. I don't know what it is you're doing right. I don't know what it is you're doing because I haven't seen any footage of you, and the information that you're providing, there are just too many variables for me to really make a diagnosis of like, how do you individually get the most value in the next 3 weeks of you playing this game? But some very common mistakes that I see in Rainmaker are not understanding how the objective is played, namely that you need to have the Rainmaker shielded from everybody else on the enemy team, and you don't want to push it until you have an advantage over the enemy team. You don't want to push the Rainmaker until it feels perfectly safe to move to the next space that you've got, unless you're really charging for lead and need it badly. Because the rest of your team should be forcing the enemy team back to make it safe for you to go forward. It's also so many games get lost because you don't just keep someone in between the Rainmaker and the goal at all times. If someone on your team is not between the Rainmaker and the goal, you need to be between the Rainmaker and the goal. And you need to be this weighing for your teammates to get in between the Rainmaker and the goal if you're on defense. Because they're out of play if they're not there. The Rainmaker can just run away from them, and that's not okay. What do you do as a competitive player yourself when you don't feel like you're enjoying the game anymore? That is not an experience that I have had, especially. If I feel like I'm not enjoying the game anymore, I'm not going to play the game. And, you know, maybe that means taking a break for a week. Maybe that means just being like, I'm going to play this game less and do this other activity more. But if there is really another priority in your life that takes over, I don't think you'll have a huge, like, internal conflict over it. I don't think you'll be like, wait, but I need to play, but I don't want to play. I think you'll just be like, no, like I had personal commitments for work that were taking me away from the game and I wasn't able to play as much, so I quit my team. And you'll just drop off the face of the earth and you'll be totally fine with that. Like, usually if you're having this like internal struggle about like, I'm not enjoying the game anymore, it's something where you're kind of like burning yourself out in some way. There's something to think about the psychology of how you're playing. Because a lot of the time people get into those situations where they're burning themselves out when really they would burn themselves out on anything that they were doing. And it's the people who write the long posts about how they're quitting the community that never actually leave the community because they still have attachments to the community. They still feel like they owe an explanation to the community. If you're just like, nah, this other thing's more important, you're fine with just leaving it. So that's something to think about. What counterplay do Splatling players have to contest long-ranged, unscoped chargers? Also, how can you consistently judge how much visibility a scoped charger has? How can you identify their blind spots? Your goal as a Splatling is never to actually fight against the charger. If you're fighting the charger, I mean, there are some times and places where you can get away with it, but most of the time you should lose. What you're trying to fight as that Splatling in order to beat a team that has a charger is everyone else except for the charger. So you want to put yourself in a position where the charger can't hit you and you can have an impact on the rest of the enemy team because you have advantages over them in terms of range and DPS and all these other things. And the charger can only take out one of your teammates at a time unless they all line up in a nice row for them. If the Hydra and the E-Leader never fight each other, the Hydra absolutely wins that match for the team. The only way that the Hydra is held down is that the E-Leader is able to actually shoot at them. So you want to play parallel to the E-Leader rather than like playing in a range where you can try and contest them. Don't try to fight them, fight their teammates. And that's how you're going to get the most benefit out of that. How can I use the new Sniper Raider 5H effectively? That's a very new weapon, and I don't know a lot about it, frankly. I have not played it very much. I am not a charger player. I am one of the last people that I would ask. My charger is known to be a meme. You saw how many shots I missed in that TikTok I made. Like, I'm not good at it. I don't think the kit is very good at all. I don't think it synergizes super well, but if you want the tacticaler, I mean, you farm for it using the sprinkler. But try playing with it and figuring out what positions help. Do I want to play more aggressive or more passive? Should I be the Rainmaker carrier? Should I be supporting the Rainmaker carrier? Like, ask yourself questions and get empirical data from like testing them out in matches. So maybe you play 3 games and you go, for these 3 games, my only question is, should I be standing on this spot on this map in this situation? So when I'm on offense, do I want to be standing here? Like, am I getting value out of doing that? Or am I getting splatted more often and not being able to help my team? Should I be standing here instead? And then you play that for the next 3 games and you see, that's not, a perfect example of exactly how to set that up, but it's that kind of thinking. Test things. Figure it out for yourself. And that's going to be more effective than asking a short-range shooter player who can't aim for a charger to save his life how it is you should play your main weapon. When is it better to combo specials with your teammates at the same time as opposed to staggering them one after the other? My guess would be a neutral and disadvantage. You'd want to brute force it by using it at the same time, while an advantage you want to stagger them. You want to use the specials. At top level, what happens is you use one special, and then you take some space with that. And then you use another special, and you take some more space with that. And that way you get the most specials output, and you're able to create enough of an advantage that you're able to do something and keep the momentum rolling in your favor. So a lot of the time, like, people will just spam a special. They're not even thinking that hard about whether they're going to use the special now or not, whether it's going to be impactful, because they just need the tempo of the game to keep going fast. But using them all at once is a huge mistake, because you will only gain control of the map for the time that those specials are active on the map. If you stagger them, you're getting control for the full amount of time that all 4 of them added together have. And by the time that the 4th one is used, you may have the first one back again. So generally you want to be staggering them more, but there are some cases where, like, in order to win a fight, you might need to pop 2 of them at once. And that helps you, get into mid from a lockout position. You've been wiped. You're probably going to want 2 specials to go back in with. But if you're in a neutral engagement or something, 1 special might be all you need to really turn that around. And then as soon as someone sees an opportunity to get value on their special, they can pop it afterward. And you can kind of just keep snowballing them forward and forward and forward by using a special to get you each next discrete step of the way.